I'm Emma.
And I'm Helena, and we both work at the MS Trust. Just a little disclaimer, we're recording this over Zoom because of Corona and social distancing, so apologies if the sound is a little bit iffy at any stage. Please do bear with us.
We'd like to welcome you to our podcast, Multiple Sclerosis, Breaking It Down, and this new series that we've called Me, MySelf and I, which focuses on people with MS stories over the past year. So why have we chosen this topic? Well, the last 12 months have been unlike any other in so many ways. On top of the social restrictions, worries about job security and the health of family and friends, people with MS have also had to contend with delays to the MS services they rely on. The MS Trust want to highlight the people and faces behind the statistics. We want to impress the urgent need to get MS services back on track by showing that there's a human story behind each person mentioned in these figures.
So in this series, we'll be meeting some different people with MS and hearing their stories from the past year. And in today's episodes, we'll be talking about how getting creative can help with a bunch of various things.
So this is interesting because we quite often hear a lot about how learning new skills can be good for you. But how can that help specifically if you have MS?
So about half of all people that have MS will at some point have trouble with thinking. Personally, I get a dreaded cog fog at the time, like cognition fog, where it feels like my brain is like swimming around in porridge. It's not pleasant. But taking sort of steps to maximize your brain health can help protect against cognitive decline, as they say. And there's actually a whole website that's all dedicated to MS brain health, which is an interesting one. And if you go to that website, you can read that education, reading, hobbies, and artistic or creative pastimes help to protect against cognitive problems in MS when pursued over a lifetime.
So I guess that makes it a bit like exercise. Sort of the more you do it, the fitter you get.
Yeah, and I think during lockdown, there's definitely been a bit of a fitness craze, hasn't there? But exercising the brain is just as important as the rest of the body. Do you have any hobbies, Emma, or did you learn any new skills during lockdown?
I suppose like the rest of, a lot of the people at the Trust, I've taken up running. I'm not particularly good at it, but I try my best. And I've been using an app on my phone to try and revitalise my Spanish skills from when I learned that at GCSE and bring them a bit more up to scratch. Not that we'll be able to use them for a little while, but hopefully one day in the future I can practice those.
Oh, it's good to kind of prepare yourself for going on holiday. I like that.
And how about you?
Well, I have been doing running as well, but I was doing that beforehand. And I guess I've been doing the really cliche things like, baking the banana breads and a lot of sourdoughs, going in and feeding my sourdough starter and talking to that for having conversation with your bread. I don't know if that's good for your cognition or not, but I also found that I started watching a lot of other people being creative, and that was kind of interesting for me as well, because I had a few friends that started streaming things, so like making music or like animating, doing all kinds of things. A lot of streamers tend to be gamers, but this was sort of different things. So I'd sit and watch them and then like chat with the other viewers and the person who is streaming as well. And it was really nice to have that sort of social interaction again, even if it was a different thing.
Oh wow, that sounds great. So is that what your chant with Ant is all about? Should we have a listen?
Yeah, let's. During lockdown, a lot of people started doing things online. There was online baking courses, there was yoga, DJing and all sorts. The online platform Twitch saw people taking to the platform for other things than gaming, which it's mostly been used for in the past. I am here today with Ant Chapman, audio and music producer, educator and musician, who uses the platform for gaming, but also for making music. I've been tuning into these sessions and listening, and he's created a great little community by people who show up every week to watch him make some beats. Hi, Ant. Thanks for talking to us.
My pleasure.
Now, before we talk about streaming, could you tell us a little bit about your MS diagnosis story?
Okay, I'm a little bit blurry on the exact dates because there was quite a long time between first symptoms and actually even going to see a doctor about it, because I had no idea what it might be. So I'm estimating it was about 5.5, nearly 6 years ago. I was in the middle of, this is how sudden it was, and I'm sure other people with MS diagnosis will recognise this, because I've since I had my diagnosis, I've spoken to people who have had exactly the same experience. I was in the middle of recording an album, and in the middle of this process, I think we were working for about 5 days, and I came home, I went to bed, and I woke up in the morning and I was like, oh, my hands feel quite numb. That's weird. And it wasn't numb to the point of not being able to do anything, but it was very noticeable. The kind of the term my neurologist has used in the past is like, it feels a bit like wearing wicketkeeper's gloves in cricket. It's like you've still got hands and you've still got fingers, but there's just certain things that become a lot more difficult to do. So, of course, I was in the middle of recording an album where I was playing guitar, which obviously wasn't amazing. I kind of struggled through. And I went to my GP about it, and my actual GP wasn't around. There was a locum, and the locum was like, I'm not really sure what that could be. Why don't we try giving you amitriptyline in case it's a sort of, it's a nerve issue. Didn't really have any effect. I went back, and they literally were just like, I'd recently started taking some blood pressure meds, and there were some side effects reported on the blood pressure med I was taking, which mentioned numbness in the hands. But, that we changed that a couple of times, no difference. And then I kind of just went off and didn't really think about it anymore. Not because I just felt at that point, I was like, oh, no one really knows what it is. So I'll just carry on and, anyway, so about a year later, I went to the doctor about a totally unrelated thing. I was having real problems with my back, and I got referred to the musculoskeletal service in High Wycombe, which is like a private company. It's like an NHS centre run by a private company. And I went up there and I was seen by a practitioner, and she was kind of examining me and talking to me about what was going on. And I happened to mention my hands, and she said, oh, let's get you an MRI, because they had a scanner there. Let's get you an MRI. So I went to get an MRI, and then I think it was like 2 days before Christmas, probably must have been 2016. The GP surgery calls me saying I have to go straight in. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird. So I went in, and again, it wasn't my GP, but the doctor said, we've looked at the MRI and it shows evidence of demyelination. It's not, and she said it's not clear cut, like from the scan, because it wasn't actually the objective of the MRI wasn't my brain. It was kind of like my neck. But she said it was like, warranted concern. So basically I was referred to a neurologist, and then began another year of basically sporadically seeing the neurologist, being referred to various places for more MRIs, which in itself is a bit of an embarrassing tale, because basically I'm a big dude, I'm a really big guy, and there was 2 different places where I went where the scanner wasn't big enough. It just simply wasn't big enough. And there's plenty of people bigger than me, much bigger than me. The one at the hospital in Wycombe looked like it was meant for children. Like the woman who was who met me there looked at me and was like, oh, and we went and looked at it, and I was just looking at it. It was like, this is like a baby one, And then I went to Stoke Mandeville, which is supposedly the best place. Too small. The scanner's too small. And in the end, I had to go to a private place that the NHS uses in Hemel Hempstead. And that was great. And they were lovely. They were really nice. Anyway, so a couple more MRIs. Neurologist still on the fence. And then eventually it was like, we'll have to do a lumbar puncture. And so I went to John Radcliffe in Oxford for the lumbar puncture. The lumbar puncture is, I always say to people who have asked me about it, it's the most unpleasant experience I've ever had in my life. It was a particularly unpleasant one as well, because they had to do it like 4 times. At one point, the doctor who was overseeing it said, look, I don't think we're going to be able to do it today. We might have to come back and do it another time under an X-ray. And I said, look, do it again because I'm not coming back. Because if we don't do it now, I'm never coming back, because I never ever want to go through this again. It's horrible. And then so a couple of months later, back to the neurologist, And it was still a little bit sort of like, well, I guess we'll have to diagnose, you know. I think basically because my symptoms, because this is the hands is the only symptom I've got which is viewed as counting. I just think he was always a little bit nervous about the diagnosis. But yeah, you know, so it was a weird one for me because I know other people who have, like, there's a good friend of mine who's a musician as well. She had a diagnosis in 2005. Her diagnosis, like mine, was relapsing and remitting, but her experience was very different, which was like much more severe symptoms, unexplained over quite a long time, getting worse and worse. Whereas with me, it's like one symptom that isn't like completely life disrupting, but it is noticeable and it does have an effect. But not a lot of people in medicine not really being sure what it was, and then eventually getting to the diagnosis. Since then, you know, I definitely think I've noticed characteristics of the relapse and remitting thing of, you know, things coming and going, and, you know, I bet lots of other people with MS diagnoses feel exactly the same right now. I bet you do as well. You know, trying to figure out if feeling a certain way, particularly with regards to fatigue, is lockdown, or is it the MS, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah.
You know, and things with mental health as well. You know, I've had exactly the same thing because I've had, you know, I take fluoxetine, you know, I've taken sertraline in the past, and again, it left me thinking, like, wow, so is this because of the MS? Is this actually, you know, is this a symptom of the MS? The neurologist is very sanguine about it all, and he really only regards this as an actual symptom. But yeah, so that's the kind of story. Mine's a weird story of sort of labyrinthine, taking a long time to get to it. But yeah, that's me.
I think that's one of the things why we like doing this type of, you know, stories with people, because it's never really clear cut. You know, my diagnosed story is quite different, but they've thought of other things, because I also went numb, and they thought that it was carpal tunnel syndrome. You know, so it's that I think when MS is so many little bits here and there, so you need someone who actually knows about MS properly to sort of put together, like, oh, okay, so there's been sort of depression, and there's been numbness, and there's been pain, you know, and then fatigue, putting them all together. But otherwise, it's just people wanting to treat the different symptoms rather than actually putting it together to one thing. So I think that's why we like to share the stories, so people know that. Yeah,
my neurologist said, you know, in a lot of ways, it's worth thinking about MS as a group of conditions, but every year there's new ones, you know, there's every single person has such a varied experience of it that we talk about it as a condition, but in reality it's like many different kinds of conditions. I mean, obviously you've got the two main ones, but within that, every single person with a diagnosis could be experiencing it totally differently. So it's tough. It's really tough.
It is. And I think especially when you tell people about being diagnosed with MS, if they know someone with MS who's had it one way or another, then you're going to get compared to that person, and your symptoms might be completely different from that one. And it's frustrating. But so you mentioned the numbness. Is that sort of still the main symptoms?
Yeah, definitely. It's always there. It's never really changed. Well, I do feel like sometimes it's worse than other times, but it is the main thing. And to be honest, there are certain things that I really struggle to do with my hands. I mean, the main thing is anything involving really tiny, thin things, right? So I'm a musician. I mean, I play guitar and bass. If I drop a plectrum on the floor, I'll be there just going, just trying to pick it up. Like my fingers are working, but for some reason it just seems very difficult to just actually get my finger under it and to put it between my fingers. And I think it just makes it a bit difficult to judge the pressure, you know, that I have to keep hold of something. But that is it. I mean, you know, like I said, I definitely feel like fatigue is a big symptom for me at the moment. I mean, I'm going back to work at university, teaching 2 days a week. from next week, and I've been trying to get out of the house just to kind of remember what it's like, because I've barely moved. I mean, funnily enough, today I just got my Google Maps timeline summary for February, and it's basically my house and the supermarket. Like, that's it, you know. And then it's got the stats. It says walking 1 mile. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. I think I actually walked a bit further than that to and from the supermarket. But you know what I mean? It's crazy. But yeah, fatigue. And, you know, I do sometimes feel like I've got a general bit of weakness in my right leg. You know, I've fallen a few times. Possibly, you know, I think foot drop. There's definitely a bit of that there. Neurologist is not really sort of entertaining that for whatever reason, but I know there's a bit of that going on there as well. So, but yeah, the hands is the main one that's always with me. Like no matter what I do, it's always with me.
Did you know much about MS before you were diagnosed?
Well, so I'm 49. I've just turned 49. So, you know, I was a child of the sort of late 70s into the mid 80s, and to be totally honest, I would expect a lot of other people my age in Britain, at least, would say the same thing. When it was first suggested that I might have the condition, there was part of me which was just horrified, because I can remember MS in the late 70s and early 80s when I was a kid being a big deal and a big cause, like, and a lot of, you know, at school there'd be people doing sponsored walks and sponsored swims and for this, because MS was this, at the time, was thought of as pretty much a terminal thing, no matter what. This was the impression that you were given, and I don't know if it's because, you know, the medical knowledge of it was a lot less back then or whatever. So my understanding of it initially was, it was just a bit of fright, because I still had this memory in my head that this was this terrible, terrible thing. But then I kind of had a little bit of context from my friend who's the musician who's in a band that I used to work with. And so I had a little bit of context, and I actually spoke to her about it, and it was really useful to kind of get her perspective on it. You know, I mean, she's had 2 children since her diagnosis, so, you know, it was really useful to talk to her and get a little bit of perspective on it. But yeah, it was weird. I would imagine, you know, younger people today who maybe when they get into their 30s or 40s, if they got a diagnosis, it might be a little bit less, you know, instantly catastrophic feeling. It was just, that was the way it was presented when I was younger. So yeah, so I did have to do a bit of learning about it as well. So
I think, you know, well, we're about the same age, and sort of growing up, there was no treatment or anything like that for MS until sort of the mid-90s anyway. So I think what people would progress faster, and that there would be, you know, scarier things out there to see. My granddad had MS, and he was in a wheelchair, and I think he was never sort of encouraged to try and do any physio or you know, any exercise. There was pretty much, as soon as his legs started being a bit weak, there was, oh, you better rest, you know, have a wheelchair, sit down kind of thing, which is very different from what we look at now. Yeah. So yeah, I think hopefully the sort of public knowledge about MS has changed since you and me were kids. Now, we're talking about 2020. Well, I suppose, you know, 2021 now as well. But looking back at everything that went on last year with lockdown, how do you feel about it? How did it hit you?
It's a weird one, because on the one hand, I'm very lucky because I could still work. So obviously my music work that I just do all that from my home studio anyway. So there was no change there. But the teaching, that all switched to online. And I'm very, very lucky because I have experience of teaching online. So I used to teach at a college called Point Blank, and I used to teach on their online school. So the technology, and this all feeds into Twitch as well, because it's the same technology, OBS in particular, that I'm using to stream on Twitch. It's all the same stuff. So I was very lucky. So, you know, I have to sort of qualify everything that I say. I don't want to seem like a kind of, a spoiled brat, as it were, and I can't lie that there was a part of me. I mean, I live on my own. There was a part of me which was sort of, I quite fancy a bit of self-isolation. That sounds pretty good to me, not having to go out, not having to go to work, like actually commute. But the reality obviously was very different, because even in practical terms, just trying to put it this way, I'm not taking DMD, disease-modifying medication, and so therefore I'm not classed as having to shield. But I'm in my 40s. I'm in my late 40s. I'm overweight. I've got MS. It's probably not a good idea to try expose myself to COVID. So basically, I was kind of almost voluntarily shielding as much as I could, living on my own. I would go to the shops, be as quick and careful as I could. And yeah, it's sort of, it's much worse this time round. Let's put it that way. It was bad enough in the first lockdown, but it's much worse this time round. Although, to be honest, I think the worst period for me was when they started to bring in the higher tiers towards the end of last year, because then it was like, well, I can't even just go out. Like, I can't even go and sit outside a pub or I mean, I've got a thing with my teaching, which is I can't mark at home. I really struggle to mark at home. There's too many distractions. I have to go somewhere to mark, and I just couldn't do anything like that anymore. And I think I marked about like 80 papers just before Christmas, and it was driving me insane. It was taking me so long to do it because I was having to do it at home. And I just think, the now is when I'm really feeling the effect of the isolation, both mentally and physically, especially physically. Like, I go out, like I said, I've been trying to warm up going out again, getting used to going out again. And I'll go out and I just feel like I'm just like, I don't think I'm walking properly. Like, I just never do, I've just not had to do it. It's a really, really hard, I've put on weight and of course I have. Everybody has. It's really tough. It's really, really tough. But as I said before, the sort of the slightly complicating factor, and I'm sure anybody with a diagnosis will relate to it, is the idea that thinking, is this the MS or is this just, is this the same for everybody? It's really hard. It's really, really hard to sort of, to know. I guess with some symptoms it's obvious, but with things like fatigue and stuff like that, it's really hard, because I think most people I know who don't have MS diagnosis are basically fatigued all the time at the moment.
And I think also people who have had COVID tend to have sort of long COVID fatigue things as well. So there's been a lot to talk about fatigue, I think, which is, I suppose, a quite good thing for the general public to get their eyes up on,
definitely.
Because it's a tricky thing. But I mean, I find when I used to walk into work, I sort of got that half an hour of a little bit of exercise, but also clearing my head space and stuff. Now, if I'm going and work, I sort of argue with my children and run in and then sit down and start doing work straight away. And I haven't had any fresh air, any exercise or any kind of mental time to prepare myself to do work. And I think little things like that seems very kind of like, well, what's that? But actually that little half an hour walk was how I survived work.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when I go back next week, because my teaching hours are a bit weird, so I don't start till 11:30 on a Tuesday, but I finish at 7:30, and then on the Wednesday I start at 9:30 and finish at 6. So it's a late finish on the Tuesday and an early start on the Wednesday. So actually, what I've ended up doing is I've booked a hotel in near where I work. I mean, I say a hotel, like a Travelodge. No, other cheap hotels are available. And it's because I looked at it and it works out the same, like in terms of, because if I was paying for the train both days, I'm getting the hotel cheap because, surprise, surprise, hardly anyone's staying in hotels because they're actually not allowed to. I've got I'm allowed to because I'm working. And the reason I'm doing that is because with the way I am at the moment with fatigue, I know for a fact there is not a chance that I could get back from. So if I finished working in Fulham at 7:30 and I'd get home at like 9:30, maybe 10, and then I've got to be up again at 6 the next morning. It's not going to happen. I'm going to be in such a mess. So I've just balanced it all up, and I'm like, right, this is how I'm going to do it. And I guess, again, lots of people relate to that because if you've got that kind of lifestyle, the fatigue, you've got to try and somehow build that in. It's kind of like doing gigs for me. I mean, obviously there's been none of that for quite a while, but like, the rare occasions when the band, a band I'm working with, or if it's my band, we go out and play like 2 or 3 gigs in a row, I've got to be really careful because, I have to rest. I have to rest between the shows because otherwise I'm just going to be a complete zombie,
Yeah, it's finding that kind of balance, isn't it? And I think I was diagnosed back in 2007, and I think it's maybe only now in the last few years that I've been able to sort of really find some balance or know the signs when I need to stop, because I think otherwise if I'm having a good day I just forge ahead and go crazy and then the day after I'm just dead. So it's kind of preparing yourself. So I think that sounds like there's kind of good shortcuts to take for your well-being.
I think so, yeah, definitely. And again, I'm very lucky I'm able to do it. So I'm not sort of judging anybody or trying to say, woe is me. I'm really glad. Do you want to know something as well, though? In a weird sort of way, I'm kind of, a night in a Travelodge right now, that seems like such a treat. That seems like such a treat. Last summer when lockdown lifted, because all the way in the spring through lockdown, it was so warm. And then lockdown lifted, and it was what was it? Was it like July? I think it was July, and it was so hot. And like in my flat, I was just like dying. And basically, I had a job in a studio near Rugby, and I just booked a night. I just found the cheapest hotel that I could find that had air conditioning, that was on the way to Rugby, and it ended up. It was at Stadium MK in Milton Keynes, like where MK Dons play. One night there, it was like 30 quid, and I just basically got in, air conditioning on, 18 degrees. It's just like, it's just like the ultimate treat. Never mind going on holiday or anything like that. It's just like a hotel room, bit of air conditioning. There you go.
I think, maybe we learn to appreciate the small things.
Exactly, yeah.
That sounds like total bliss to me, actually.
Totally.
You mentioned sort of gigs and stuff. I mean, some bands and things have tried to do things online, but I mean, there must be, even if you try and do things like that, it must be really hard, because I mean, I've been to a few of your band's gigs, and there's such a good atmosphere, and I always kind of come out of there with a smile on my face, because it's, you can tell that the band is having fun and stuff. So it must be quite hard for people who've been trying to do gigs and stuff online.
Yeah, we've not really done anything like that. We did our Zoom at Christmas where we were all on the Zoom, but we weren't doing music. We were just being stupid. Yeah, I think that stuff is really tough. It's that studio that I was talking about, the one that I do a lot of work at up near Rugby. Like, they did a live stream for somebody. Like, they were the venue where they did it from. And it was a huge undertaking. And actually, it was one of the first nights I was actually streaming properly, because I started my stream and then my phone was ringing, and it was Oscar, who runs the studio, ringing me up to basically go, how do we do this? How do we make it work? So I had to like stop the stream for a bit, take the call, and then do the tech support, and then come back. So yeah, it's really hard to do. And, lots of people have done their sort of, lockdown videos where everybody's recorded themselves separately. I mean, I think, I don't know, I'd kind of like to do a bit of that. I think the big disadvantage we have is that, how can I put it? Not everybody in the band is perhaps as technically, apt as some of the people in the band. Some of them might, put it this way, I can't imagine trying to talk Johnny, the bass player, bless him, through trying to set himself up to be able to play along to like a click and a pre-recorded track or whatever. I think that would be really tough. But we have been, I have been massively creative. That's the upside, is that starting to do all the Twitch stuff has meant I've made more music in the last year than I've made in the previous 10. So, you know, like, yeah, I've released an EP. I've got about 12 ideas, sort of skeletons for tracks for the band. I've got 7 stream beats. I'm doing this. So what I'm doing on my music streams at the moment is this idea of stream beats. So people release these albums which people can use in the backgrounds of their streams or in the background of YouTube videos. So then they're sort of copyright free in terms of they're not going to get copyright strikes if the system detects them using this music. So I'm like, I want to do one. I want to do one, and I want it to be kind of what I like, which is, you know, I quite like some of that stream beat stuff, but some of it's a bit polite. So I want some stuff that maybe is a little bit less polite. And so, yeah, doing that, I've worked on a bunch of other people's records. I do mixing and mastering for other people. I've done tons and tons of that this year. I mastered an album at the end of last year, which if it had come out last year would be like my favourite album of the year. So I got to do all this like really exciting stuff. So yeah, it's, you know, it's a weird situation because in a way it's benefited me creatively, you know, but obviously there's huge ramifications, not just for me, for everybody. But, you know, I know there's been a huge, it's weird saying a huge physical toll when it's a physical toll from not doing anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, rather than physical
absolutely.
toll from doing something incredibly strenuous. It's a weird one, but it's, you know, I think it's tough. And I mean, I know I would say the people I feel the most for in terms of, you know, people working in music and creators are all the people I know who work on touring, like, you know, who do sound and run PA systems and crew, roadies, people that are trucking stuff around, because I've got friends who do that who have not had a day's work since like about March the 12th last year. So getting on for a year, and it's probably not going to change anytime soon. So yeah, so I'm very, very lucky. I'm really, really, you know, I'm saying I'm very lucky. It's been really hard, but I am really lucky that I've still had stuff going on. So yeah.
I think that's really the thing. It's been lovely to see how creative some people have gotten. You were saying about the first lockdown was maybe easier than the second one. I think people were quite excited about some of these things. You know, people who were making TikTok videos and they were doing all sorts of things that they would have never done before, but it was sort of bringing a little bit of joy to people.
Yeah.
But I think a lot, you know, you could be outside, there was lovely weather, and now it's been cold and miserable. And if you want to escape the house, there's not like you can go and sit outside because it's too cold. You know, if you are outside walking, you have to keep on moving because it's not really been that. So I think, yeah, and we've done it now, so we're a bit fed up, all of us. This is just
it's not new anymore, you know.
Yeah, that's it. So when you're doing the streaming, do you think that sort of helps your mood and your?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's it is, because it's just it's like put it this way, I always feel happiest, most content if I'm sort of making something, if I'm creating something, or if I'm or when I say creating something, even if I'm working on somebody else's music to help create a finished product, you know, I'm always at my happiest then. So doing the streams has been great. And the way I've approached it is basically like, I want to try and learn as much as I can about doing other stuff within it. So for example, little video things that there are on the stream where you can basically, like, when viewers are in the channel, this is a Twitch thing, when you're in the channel, you gradually build up points for being in the channel and watching. Then you can spend those points to do various things. And there's like sounds you can trigger off, but then there's also video things that go across the screen and stuff like that. So I was learning how to do all of that, you know, and so I was basically taking videos, removing the backgrounds from them, editing them in DaVinci Resolve. So I've been learning DaVinci Resolve a bit, which is fantastic. And just doing all this sort of, you know, production work on the stream to try and make it a little bit more entertaining. I mean, the thing is, basically, like, you know, I have had a Twitch login for years, and I would watch it very occasionally, very sporadically. And I would watch Limmy, the Scottish comedian, who's kind of, you know, who's made it his job. It's like his full-time job. But, you know, it was it was really in lockdown that you started to see some really interesting approaches to it. Some sort of, not either non-gaming or gaming, but in a different way, And really, the streamer that kind of got me starting thinking about doing it was this guy Zaffa Cakes. So he's this comedian called Bilal Zafar, and he was a stand-up comedian, but basically, so obviously all of his work went away. There's loads of comedians on Twitch now, and he started streaming. We was like, so he knew Limmy. Limmy said, "Get on Twitch," and he was like, "Oh, I don't know what to do. What games do I like?" And he was like, "Well, I quite liked Pro Evolution Soccer 5 from 2005." So he basically started playing that on the stream. And then as he was doing it, he started wearing a suit, a jacket and a shirt and tie, like as if he's the manager. And he kind of invented this character for himself. And then he would kind of invent characters for the players. And he would like cut the images out from the game and talk to them in the stream. Yeah, so it was him that totally inspired me in terms of just actually doing Twitch. Not that I could do what he does, but just in terms of just getting on Twitch and doing it. And then through his stream, I've met loads of other people. And generally, I just like this idea of everyone that I watch. Zaffa Cakes is the streamer that, I watch Slimmy sometimes, but it's such a big stream. It's so hard to get into. Because for me, I think you said before, it's the social aspect of it. And those streams that have thousands of viewers, it's impossible to have that. But I think up to a few hundred, you can get that. And then Zaffa Cakes stream, it's totally like that. And I would start following other people that would be in the chat who stream. And then so I've kind of met all these other people. Sometimes he would raid another streamer at the end of the raid. It's a raid. I should explain. A raid is basically where you end the stream by going to somebody else's stream and taking your audience with you. And I met all these people. And so now between you and other people that come into the stream, most of whom are friends, but then there's still people who I've met who have just come and they come back, but then all these other streamers as well who come to see, and then I go and see their streams, and it's this really nice sort of supportive community where everyone basically is trying to kind of support everybody else and keep creative and helping each other, and it's really good. I expect the world of the actual, because I think most people, if they know what Twitch is, but they don't really look at it, they just think of, these streamers who have got 20, 30,000 viewers and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, but I literally never encounter any of that. I literally, my Twitch world is limited much more to much, much smaller communities. I never see any of that. So yeah, it's been a huge help. Creatively, especially, I just feel genuinely in the last sort of decade, the idea of making music, it's only really the band where I actually sort of creatively felt like doing it. But making music myself on my own, I just had no interest in doing it, none whatsoever. And with the stream, if I could, I would be doing it every day. All day, every day. If I could live and do that, I'd 100% be doing that.
I find the streams are so interesting to sort of watch how you're working with the music and how you're creating it and stuff. Because I've never done anything like that, but I've had quite a lot of friends that are doing music, and I've always admired them for them. So, but I've never really seen them sort of, sit and fiddle around with it. So I think when we decided that we needed a new themes for our podcast, I just thought, gosh, that would be so interesting to sort of see it in action being made, and sort of maybe hopefully that people with MS could come and join the stream and shout out helpful suggestions. I know that sometimes when I shout out helpful suggestions, they're not always helpful.
Well, I hear everybody's post in the chat. I'm here for it.
So I point out my sort of ignorance, because he made this sound that I was like, oh, that's really nice. What is that? And he was pointing out that's the metronome.
Oh dear.
Yeah, no, it's so much fun. I think, for me personally, that's really been a great help, because I feel like, you miss that kind of social interaction when you go to the pub, and you might know one person, but you don't know the other people, but then you start chatting. So I've started chatting with some of the other people that are in your stream that I didn't know since before. And it's great. You start following them on other places, like Instagram or whatever. And it's suddenly like you actually managed to make some new friends that you would never have sort of met
Absolutely
before. So I think that's brilliant. And I had used Twitch when I did like a 24-hour gaming thing for the MS Trust, which was really fun. But again, we only had like a few people now and again come and watch. But when we were sitting at 3 a.m. in the morning and you're gaming and falling asleep, if somebody popped up to say hello, that was quite nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a quite fun way of interacting with people. So we mentioned the making the podcast theme. What got you motivated to get involved with the MS Trust, apart from somebody hopping up on your feed and bullying you to do it?
Well, I think the MS Trust is a brilliant source of information. I mean, that's the thing, is nowadays, if I want to try and find something out about something related to MS, the MS Trust website's always like my first port of call, because I feel like it's the most I was going to say trustworthy, but that makes it sound like there's other sources out there which aren't trustworthy. But but it's definitely it feels the most sort of knowledgeable and also practical and approachable. It's I think it's quite and it's quite positive. The overall, the branding and the way information is put across, I think, is usually put across in quite a positive way. And so basically I just think, I think it's definitely a good thing to try and get involved. I think with a lot of charity, it's not necessarily the case that my skill set would be that useful, but this is a situation where it's something that I can definitely help with, and to be totally honest, anything to do with podcasts, I love to get involved anyway, because I probably listen to more podcasts than I do music. So I'm always very keen to kind of get involved in the podcast space. So,
and of course, last summer when we had our MS Trust home festival, Collapsed Lung, Ant's band, was one of the people that we featured.
Yeah.
So, how can people get involved in your streaming sessions?
I do music on Mondays and Fridays, and currently on Thursdays I'm playing the game House Flipper, which, if you've never seen it, is quite interesting, because on paper it is the most boring game you've ever seen, but it's actually very enjoyable, and it's quite a fun game to stream, because people can kind of get involved in the chat with suggestions and just generally being a bit silly. But House Flipper is basically a game where you buy and renovate houses and sell them on, and it's weirdly both boring and quite compulsive. So, but the music sessions on Mondays and Fridays, usually what I'm doing is I'm making these stream beats on Mondays using Ableton Live, the platform that I used to do that. And then on Fridays, I'm normally using Machine. And Machine is this very specific thing for making beats. It's very, very focused on making beats. But at the moment, I'm just focusing on Ableton Live on both days, because I want to try and get the Stream Beats album finished. And it's at twitch.tv/Ant Chapman, all one word. And basically, come and join in. If you enjoy it, you can drop me a follow, and you can actually subscribe. You can put a little money in the pot to sort of, fund what your favourite streamers do. I'm not suggesting it has to be me. If you have Amazon Prime, you get a free subscription every month anyway. So even if you didn't want to actually lay out some extra money, if you link your Amazon Prime account to Twitch, you can do an Amazon Prime subscription, which doesn't cost you any money, but puts a little bit of money the streamer's way. So
apart from, streaming world and things, hopefully lockdown is ending. I mean, people are getting vaccinated and we might see an end. Yeah. And looking forward to hopefully not being in any more lockdowns. What hopes have you got? What your wishes for the future?
I mean, it depends if I'm thinking about my situation, and I'm thinking about, because I'm very conscious that obviously I'm not in a typical situation in terms of what I do and my living situation, you know. But part of me really hopes that, I'm not saying that I necessarily think everybody should be post-lockdown just saying, well, I'm never going back to work in an office ever again. But I think there should be, I really think it would be crazy if industry in general didn't stop and think, you know what, maybe expecting people to commute for hours every day to an office and then home again, when it's been demonstrated that this work can be done at home, I think that should be something that is explored by a lot of companies and institutions, because it's I think a lot of people have realised how draining it is, and obviously as somebody with an MS diagnosis, you know, I know more than some how draining it can be. But even for people who are in, you know, good health, it's draining and tiring. And not only, and I mean, I read a story the other day about how, you know, the two lockdowns have kind of created almost like a generation of accidental savers, because basically people are not paying out to commute and they're not buying lunch at work. And, you know, I found that last year I was looking at my bank account and thinking, oh, the university must have paid me early. And then I'm like, oh no, they haven't. I just haven't spent money that I would normally be spending. So I hope that we have a bit of a rethink about how we work, you know. I mean, I live just outside London, so, you know, it's very much a commuter area. And you know, when I do have to get a commuter time train into town, I just look around at these people and I just think, you know, they're doing this 5 mornings a week and then 5 evenings back. I'm just like, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. We cannot live like this. It's just mad. So I'd hope that it will maybe be a little bit of a spur on to there being a bit of a rethink about how we live, you know. And I mean, I'm really, really hoping that, well, put it this way, I'm seeing lots and lots of venues and artists announcing concerts for like June the 21st onwards. And I really hope that's not a bad idea, you know. There's other stuff, like we've got a gig booked. We got a gig at the start of October. And I think that's pushing it, you know. I think that might still be pushing it. So I really hope what we don't see happen is that people rush back to pubs and venues at the expense of being still careful, you know. On the upside, the number of people that have been vaccinated so far is looking very positive. I've had my first vaccine, so I had the Pfizer flavour. So,
and did you feel okay when you had yours?
Totally fine. Touch wood, it'll be totally fine. And I'll hopefully get the next one in about 10 weeks. So, but yeah, it's, but we mustn't undo the good stuff that we've done. You know, we mustn't just rush in. I'm trying not to be cynical. I'm trying not to be cynical. I'm trying to think the best of my fellow humans. You know?
Well, it is hard sometimes, and I am very much on the same thought pattern as you on that one, because I feel like we can't go back to complete normality straight away, because we do need, because everybody won't have been vaccinated.
Exactly.
You know, I think group 6. Sort of looking at maybe towards the end of August, when we would have had the second lot. So I mean, you know, we would all be really been out and about for 2 months then.
Yeah.
So I think, just be careful.
I think that's totally. We can't just instantly go back to just unrestricted, you know, back the way it was. I think we would just be crazy to do that. I'm very conscious about it, doing what I do for teaching, because I'm teaching university age students who are basically, you know, the most likely to catch it and transmit it, albeit less likely to suffer really badly if they get it. But if they're transmitting it, that doesn't really matter, you know. So it's funny you talk to me now when I'm just about to go back to work, because when I was just about to go back to work in September, I was absolutely terrified. And actually now I don't feel so bad, partly because I had my first jab, 2 weeks ago? So theoretically, I'm up to like a kind of 80% reduction in contracting it and transmitting it. But who knows? I think by now what's made me feel a bit easier about it is just the fact that I've just had enough of, lockdown. I've really, really had enough. I just want to see some people. What I really want to see is my friends. I want to go and see my mum, but in the meantime, students will do. So just seeing the students will be great. Just seeing some actual human beings in the same room as me will be amazing. So the one thing I'm really hoping though is that as we go back to something resembling reality closer, we don't just find everyone buggers off from Twitch, because I'm not, I mean, I might not be able to do 3 nights a week, but I'm definitely not leaving because I love it. It's super, super rewarding for me. I might actually start doing some stuff on YouTube and maybe even Facebook and Instagram as well. Because I've seen a lot of people. There's a guy who I was watching the other night, who's a guy I used to work with at Point Blank, another music guy, and he was streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch at the same time because he kept responding to these people's chats, and I'm like, who said that? No one said that. Then I realised he was like on different platforms at once. So, maybe I'll do
Windows.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing with Twitch is I like all the bells. I like all the toys. I like the toys you get on Twitch.
It's so much fun. I find it like absolutely crazy when you've been in your stream sometimes when everything happens. I mean, we were trying very hard to make your CPU crash. I think we're both getting everything up at once. It
was getting pushed. It was definitely getting pushed.
So much fun. And if you don't know what it is, it sounds very strange what we're talking about, but I can really recommend it. It had me giggling for a very long time. Remind us again about your sort of how to watch you both on Twitch, but also your social handles.
So twitch.tv/Ant Chapman, Ant Chapman Audio on Twitter. I think it's Ant Chapman Audio on Instagram. And if you look for Anthony Chapman Audio on Facebook, that's my page on there. And other places often I'll use Scissor Kicks, which is the name that I used to use when I was like doing dance music and that. But I'm trying to transition away from that and be a little more professional. So
and, you can find some of your music on Bandcamp as well.
On Bandcamp, yes, yeah. So there's various things. So there's the band Collapse Lung. It's collapselung.bandcamp.com, and then mo-wab. mo-wabb.bandcamp.com. That's my solo stuff that I made last year, which was all stuff that was started on stream. I then took it away and kind of polished it up a little bit, but it was all stuff that was started on stream.
Yeah, that was really interesting, sort of watching it being made and then finished. I enjoyed that. It was felt like a privilege to be in on the process, actually. See how your mind works.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's great for me because it just means to be honest, if nothing else, it just means I have to do it. Like if I say, I'm going to be on stream at this time making music, I have to do it, and it means that because if I don't, that's my whole experience of making music the last few years has just been, because I'll happily work on other people's music all day, all night, but then when it's my own music, I'm like, right, let's make some music. And I'm like, well, I could make a cup of tea. I could, put the washing on. I could like watch an episode of this show on tea. Do you know what I mean? Just endless distraction.
So what you're saying is that we should all do our sort of work whilst we're streaming.
Maybe.
So we'll feel the pressure for people.
Maybe.
You should do you're going to do your marking next time.
I think it depends on your job. I think it depends on your. Did you see that in the news the other day about the surgeon in America who was actually operating on somebody, and when he was in court for I can't remember what I think it was a traffic fine, and it was like a virtual court session over Zoom, and they opened up the call and he was there in his scrubs, and the judge was like, so are you actually like in an operating theatre? He's like, yes, there's a patient being operated on here now, but my colleague is actually taking care of it. And he's just like, let's reschedule. Yeah. So I think that's going a little bit too far. But I definitely think, if you're doing something creative, there's something to be said for doing it in public. Maybe not all the time, but trying it out. It's quite good. I mean, I watch people doing art and writing stuff. There's a guy who comes to my streams, Lemons McBatflip, who does like he'll do, I think on Tuesday nights, him and his chat invent a product and then write a jingle for it. And you know, I think it's really, really good. Like, it's really, really good for creative stuff. So, oh, that's right. On Monday nights, he writes a story just with the help of the chat, like a picture book. So.
It's brilliant. And I mean, you don't have to be super technical to get involved with Twitch either, do you, really? Because you don't have to have all the crazy stuff happening.
Yeah,
they just have an account.
Twitch has their own, and if you did want to stream, Twitch has their own app to do it as well. I use a third-party one because it does a lot of the cool stuff that I want it to do. But Twitch have got the thing is Twitch Studio, which is very, very simple to set up. And really, if you've got a camera, you know, you don't even have to have a camera. You don't even have to have your face on the stream. But if you do, you just have the camera and you tell Twitch Studio what you want to put out on the stream, and it kind of takes care of everything for you. So.
And obviously, if you want to do some fundraising for the MS Trust, we got
of course,
MS Play, which is it happens at specific set times, but you can take part in it whenever you want to. We've done it as a 24-hour gameathon kind of thing, but you could do whatever you want to. And as having taken part in it, I can recommend it. It was.
Well, I think I'm definitely going to do some kind of gaming for that on that weekend after the music stream. I would love to say I'd do a 24-hour something, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
We kind of cheated a little bit because we were doing it sort of my husband and my two kids, so we took part. So I think I had maybe like 3-hour nap at one point.
That's all right. Oh, nice. Brilliant.
But yeah, no, it's great fun. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been,
my pleasure.
It's been very interesting, and we're looking forward to seeing more of you in the stream, and also hearing the. Well, by the time this is going out, obviously the theme would have already been recorded.
Well, so. I hope it's good. I hope you
future,
enjoyed it.
That's confusing.
Yeah, I hope the listeners enjoyed it. So.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Now, if this was a commercial podcast, here's where there would be an advert. But as we're a charity, we don't do that. So instead, we'd like to take the opportunity to tell you about our fantastic resources for people with MS.
Our website, which is mstrust.org.uk, has tons of information and resources for people affected by MS. If you're interested in brain health, you can pop over to the A to Z pages and read about that on there.
Or maybe you are the next streaming star and would like to take part in MS Play, our online gaming streaming fundraising challenge. Ant himself actually took part during March after this podcast. The interview with him was recorded, and he raised over £1,500 for the MS Trust, which is absolutely amazing. So have a look at mstrust.org/MS Play for more information.
And we're back.
All right. Do you feel like you want to go on to become a streamer now, Emma, after listening to that?
I mean, I don't feel like I'm good enough at gaming myself to do it, but it's definitely opened my mind up more to watching other people streaming their gaming online. I know a few people who do it and they seem really into it as well. So yeah, definitely something I'd consider now.
And I think the interesting thing is like it's not just gaming. I mean, there's loads of stand-up comedians on there, which can be entertaining. And I think the people that are doing things like Ant's doing with the music is really interesting. I mean, I'm a bit biased because I have been going to Ant's stream for a while, and sort of I'm one of the people who regularly visits and sits in the chat room, and we've kind of nice little community where we've been, the same people pop up and talk, and it's been interesting to sort of see him put together this album that he has been doing, and then that will go up on Bandcamp. So it's kind of like seeing the product start to finish, and I think it's really encouraging. And I really liked, what he was saying about the fact that this has made him make more music in this year than he has in a really long time. And if brain health is anything to really, kind of take into account, then clearly that is a really good way of keeping that brain active.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really good, obviously, for those who are recording, like you say, keeping their brain active, but also it's just bringing us back to that little bit of not quite normality, but it's offering an alternative to those sort of gigs and concerts and live comedian shows that we probably are starting to miss now.
Yeah, I mean, Ant band Collapsed Lung is. I've been to a few gigs of theirs, and they're always like really kind of amazing energy at them. So you do really kind of, I suppose, when you see him sit and make music, you get reminded about, oh, I wish we could go to gigs again. But I think this is a good thing as well. And you know, I'm sitting there during the stream, and it's amazing, almost like how it feels like you're, I don't know, down the pub and chatting with your mates in the chat room.
Yeah, definitely. If you sort of replaced live chat with typing it on a computer, I think it's a very similar thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's but honestly, I think many of these type of streams have kind of kept me safe during lockdown, because weirdly, I made, like I said, I've made a few new friends through them because of, you know, you see the same people, the same names. I don't always know the name of the people because it tends to be the nickname that they have. But it's strange. Like every Tuesday, for example, I watch someone do DJ sessions, and it's like part of my calendar now. And I really hope that some of these things will keep on, you know, going even after lockdown.
Yeah, I do think it's really lovely. I know, as I mentioned, I know a few people who get involved as well as yourself, and they've sort of made friends from all over the world that they wouldn't necessarily communicate with if it wasn't for these streaming services. But yeah, like you say, I think it would be really good to see what we can take away from this after lockdown, even if we're allowed out. I think everyone's approach will be a bit more flexible, and this could probably benefit the MS community as well if you're struggling to get to those hospital appointments or things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously some appointments might not work online, but certainly others would do. So I think it's been a strange year, but I think we can learn a lot about that kind of flexibility of work, and not that everything doesn't actually need to be done in person.
So remember that if you've got any questions about MS, we're here for you. Our inquiry service is available Monday to Friday, except on UK bank holidays, and that's from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Outside of these hours, you're welcome to leave us a message, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can find this podcast on Spotify, Google and Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music. Get in touch, and like they say, like and subscribe. And do recommend us to other people as well who might be interested. Thank you for coming and chatting with me today, Emma, online.
Yeah, lovely to speak with you.
One day we'll meet in person. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
And we would also like to say a big thank you to Ant Chapman Audio for providing us with this podcast theme tune.